was essentially against police brutality because of the death of Khalid Saeed at the hands of the police. So what you're seeing is a return to mass demonstrations against police brutality.
And although it didn't reveal anything new, perhaps, about police abuses in Egypt, was the murder and abduction of Italian student Giulio Regini something of a turning point?
It could be marked as a turning point because it brought international attention. But I think we have to take a longer view of the past year. In August of last year, in 2015, President Sisi passed a couple of laws, and one of them was the terrorism law. And in the terrorism law, basically, police and military are immune from prosecution and being held accountable for basically what he calls performing their acts, which is if they are seen as using force against breaking protest, they're immune from prosecution against this. So what this created in Egypt was a culture of encouraging or actually looking the other way for police brutality. And so this culture, once it continues and it grows, what you see is police see themselves as immune. So they can go into a hospital and beat up doctors who refuse to falsify reports. They can go into a taxi and if they don't like the fare, kill the taxi driver. And once you have this kind of brute force entering into society and it looks like the regime is making it acceptable and these are beyond the scope of the law, what you're having is a culture that is being supported by the regime.
Are we likely to see any change in the culture of police impunity, the kind of lack of accountability that you describe? Will there come a point where the regime sees the actions of the police and the security forces as a threat to their survival rather than something that reinforces it?
Well, protests have been called for tomorrow for a return to by the physicians to return to the street against police brutality. And it's interesting that this comes the day before this call for people to come to the street. So we should wait and see what happens tomorrow and how the state responds to it. But if the state doesn't actually start to hold its security apparatus accountable for what happens to the average citizens, then what's happening is a fomenting of a level of frustration against the very people that are supposed to protect the citizenry. And once you have a culture of repression that leads to a fomenting of resentment by the citizenry against the state, what you're leading to is an unstable moment that could lead to a counter-revolution.
Thanks very much, Dalia Fahmy, live for us from New York. Appreciate your time.